So Twin Spires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully, and we have Nick Tamro back filling in for Vance Hansen, who's out today. We're going to be talking about the Diana Stakes, Colonial Downs opening weekend, and what else caught our eye from the weekend of racing across the country. We'll also look ahead to Haskell Day at Monmouth Park and Saratoga Stakes racing as well. But before we start, it was our final week of the fantasy handicapping contest, and James is back on top. He finished out as our week 4 winner. So congrats. That's 2 weeks that you won the fantasy handicapping contest, and definitely was a lot of fun. Nick was a part of this as well. So congrats, James. Any words of wisdom or
Well, when I saw everybody's picks on Friday and I saw where I was the only person with the lone speed in that Diana, I felt pretty good about it. I even took integration on. I picked one of the other two in that race and still came out on top. So very, very happy to win 2 of the 4 weeks before we get into the live handicapping tournaments here soon on Twin Spires.
Yeah, I had integration, but with those scratches, the payout really didn't help me at all. And you had the runner-up with 911 Turbo. That was the name of it, right?
All right, yeah.
I'm already forgetting. All right. Well, let's start with Whitebeam winning the Diana. And Nick, I'll turn it over to you since you're our guest today. So Whitebeam got her back-to-back win in the Diana in this race, earning her first win in 5 starts. What were your thoughts on Whitebeam winning this race?
Yeah, second straight Diana win and 9th overall for Chad Brown, which is an amazing number. You'd imagine in his career that number could probably get up towards 20 before all is said and done. But, it was the tactics employed that really made the difference. Last year, Whitebeam had the unenviable task of stalking outside of an Italian who was a really heavy favorite in the Diana and was coming off of consecutive Grade 1 wins earlier in the year. So, what this race boiled down to from a tactical perspective was how much speed was Evie Jet's going to show. And, it's one of those where you watch the replay and you realize that Flavien Prat didn't send Whitebeam to the lead. Whitebeam took Flavien Prat to the lead. And nobody showed any interest early. And when she was able to establish things on the front end, you get midway down the backstretch here and it looked pretty clear this race was over, and she had plenty left when asked the question. I think the interesting thing about the difference in the way she performed was that in both the Beaugay and the Just a Game, they were slightly different races in terms of how they unfolded. The pace in the Beaugay was exceptionally strong, and she was ultimately run down by Nisi Marie. But what you were taken by was that she never really extended away from the other speed horse in that Beaugay. And then in the Just a Game, she was really in position, and she just didn't have that something extra. Whereas here, I think when she saw open space the entire way and really didn't sense a horse right next to her when she got to about the 8th pole, she did start to extend herself a little bit. So I think I'm always an advocate for connections, getting more speed out of horses. And the fact that she showed what she did, I think had a lot to do with her being able to dictate terms to everybody. So I thought it was a well-deserved win, and it's nice to see good horses perform at a high level. And she's one that when she's on her game, she's very good.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those points. Evie Jets was drawn inside of Whitebeam in the Just a Game last month. So Evie Jets went to the front. But Evie Jets had stalked in 4th when she won the Boston Spa last year, being drawn outside and running 4th in the Just a Game. I could see her switching to stalking tactics on Saturday. But the thing you referenced last year, Whitebeam, most of her Grade 1 starts were during the year until the December, where it gets against an Italian who was a speedball. And then even in the Matriarch, she's up there pressing the pace. She came back this year in the Beaugay. She pressed second to Spirit Wind, who showed high speed in there. And she was more than willing to press in the Just a Game. But I think off of that Diana, that should open up what the best strategy for Whitebeam moving forward is. I mean, there's not a ton of speed in the filly and mare turf division. I thought this was her best performance by far. And I thought this was the first time that Flavien Prat essentially gave her head and let her run early. Like I said before, he was always more than willing just to press the pace at 2nd or 3rd. So I think that, there could be an upcoming start where she doesn't make the lead, maybe doesn't win it, but I would be gung-ho with Chad Brown and Flavien Prat on perhaps taking advantage of her speed moving forward off of this performance, because it was a career best effort. It was easily the best performance on turf in the nation last week. Got high Brisnet speed rating and class rating. And I just thought that I just think this is a strategy that they should look to exploit moving forward. Send her hard from the gate and see if she can, get out there and be even more effective showing the way early than pressing the action.
I don't have much more to add to that. I will say she got a 99 Brisnet speed figure, a career best. You were mentioning it was a career best effort. And then Whitebeam became the 9th fillier mare to win this event twice. Chad Brown, of course, as you mentioned, Nick, has won this event 9 times, but dating back to 2016, he's only lost one Diana, and it was in 2021 when Charlie Appleby won with Althika, I think is how you say it.
Yeah.
And then as far as her stablemates, Whitebeam had 4 stablemates in this race, and she had been beaten by less than a length in her last 2 by stablemates. This time she got the best of her stablemates in this race. And if you look at Chili Flag, coming into this race, had a 3-win streak in graded stakes, but then finished 9th, had a poor outing here, but is in the mix for top turf female. But now Whitebeam, I would say, with really close losses in her previous 2 starts in 2024, now I think is right there in the mix as well. So we'll see. There's so many Chad Brown runners in the turf division. You just never know who's going to come out on top, but go ahead.
I think Chili Flag is better at a mile. I mean, she was able to get a mile in the 16th, but I thought the 9 furlong distance just did her in on Saturday. As far as Didia, now that to me is the real question, sort of exiting that race, what they do with her. And the thing with Didia to me is that I'd almost think about, now it's they can go run in a lucrative 7-figure stake at Kentucky Downs or go for the grade 1 at Keeneland. And it's easy for me, not being one of the connections, to say bypass those races. But I would almost train her up to the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Turf, Nick and Ashley. I think she runs better. She's run huge races fresh. I mean, she's run some big efforts off of 3 months layoffs. She has a trouble stringing together these top class performances. Couldn't run back to the New York on Saturday. And like I said, it's easy for me to bypass another grade 1 win or a huge payday. But I think Nacho Correas, he's got a decision to make, because it might be a situation where they could just gear her up for Del Mar. Even last year, she went out to Santa Anita, ran a huge race, Didia did, and then was completely flat in the Filly Mare Turf. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but I would consider freshening her up.
James,
well, you mentioned it too, that you didn't want to back her because you think she needed another start. So
I thought she just needed more time between races. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm going to be kind to you for advocating for a horse to be off for 4 months, but no, I get your point, and I do think she might run a little bit better fresh. I went back and forth on her performance. I think I was a little critical of her at first, and that probably had a little bit to do with my own wagering. I kind of thought she was kind of a cinch in there. I thought she was better than those horses. So I singled her on some of my multi-race bets. Luckily, I used Whitebeam as a backup. But then I went back and watched the replay. I watched the pan. I watched the head-on. She never really got into all that comfortable a spot in the final quarter mile. And it does feel like when you've watched her good races, they've come in outside stalking positions. I know it sounds totally ridiculous, and part of me wants to be like, what are you talking about when you say that a horse who saved ground in the pocket on the turf didn't have things basically as good as they could get? But she might not be all that comfortable doing so. I will say that there was about a 70-yard period, too, where it didn't look like Jose Ortiz was all that comfortable down there either. And right when they're about to try and come through, Gina Romantica comes over and makes it a little bit tighter and really keeps her from being able to really put herself into there so that she could make a run at Whitebeam. The problem is that she never really accelerated. And so it was an underwhelming performance based on what we had seen in the New York. So I would hope that, and I would imagine there'll be some consideration given to running her in the Beverly D, given her past history at Colonial, and then maybe giving her some time off after that, because there's really not a race that serves as an effective prep between the Beverly D and the Breeders' Cup, because the Flower Bowl is run around 3 turns, and I don't know if she necessarily wants to do that. I don't even really know if the Breeders' Cup would be on her radar this year, because I don't know if she wants to go 11 furlongs around returns. I suppose if she does, then you'd consider a race like the Flower Bowl, but that would be coming back again somewhat quickly before shipping over. The only thing at Keeneland for her is at a mile. So, I mean, you're not going to run her at a mile. That's a useless distance for her. So it'll be interesting to see what Nacho does. I know he had mentioned the Diana or the Beverly D and opted to go to the Diana. But I hope he does still end up giving the Beverly D an opportunity. It's 4 more weeks. And you know what, James, at the very least, we'll test your theory about whether she doesn't run well when she comes back quickly, because that is a quick turnaround by modern standards.
You mentioned the Beverly D. Good segue into Colonial Downs, who also had opening weekend this weekend and a couple of stakes on Saturday. So, James, what were your takeaways from opening weekend of Colonial Downs?
Well, I liked they had the Beverly D preview and the Million preview, and I definitely liked Nadette's performance better in the Beverly D preview, better than Integration's win in the Million preview. Nadette, it's fair to say she was an Irish stakes winner. She came over to Neil Drysdale's barn back in 2022. And he's run her nothing but in stakes races since he got her. And it's fair to call her an underachiever. She lost her first 9, I think, U.S. starts before finally breaking through in April's Wilshire, where she won that race by open lengths. And then she came back 2 starts later in this Beverly D preview. And I just like the turn of foot she showed on the far turn, Nadette. She would rate it in last. She basically rolled past all of her rivals and opened a clear lead in upper stretch. And I thought it was a good win. Integration, my main concern with him is it just, for whatever reason, he has just not gone on this season. I didn't think it was that good looking a performance. He had a little bit of trouble like switching leads, I thought, in upper stretch. And Kendrick Carmouche had to work on him for a second just to get him to, go on by and strike the front. So I did come away thinking Nadette ran a really good race for Drysdale on Saturday. She's got a chance at least to factor, I would think, in the Beverly D. I don't really like Integration for the Million coming back off of that effort, Nick.
Yeah, I agree. Integration's kind of been one of the bigger disappointments in 2024. I mean, I think all of us after the Hill Prince last fall would have really thought he was going to be a major, major player in races like the Old Forester Turf Classic, the Manhattan, and the Arlington Million. And now he seems like kind of a shell of himself. He's just really not much. The Million preview was scratched down to 3 horses, in large part because they took a ton of rain at Colonial on Friday, and I think that the total tally was like 3 inches of rain. So it's kind of amazing that they were able to run those races on turf at all. Credit to the track super down there. But it was not, I think, what you'd expect. The Nadette performance was very strong. It also had a little bit of a smell to it of being on a wet turf course, because generally you don't see those kind of margins under normal circumstances. But I don't see really why Nadette can't be an interesting horse for a race like the Beverly D. We'll see what ends up coming over from overseas. And obviously, through the history of the race, the Beverly D was won by some really, really nice horses that had come in from overseas. But generally, our domestic contingent is very strong as well. It actually ended up being a huge key race in 2023 as well, with Fev Rover and Gina Romantica both coming back and winning grade 1s in subsequent starts. So hopefully it is again. It's always one of my favorite days of racing. So glad to see those couple of strong efforts at Colonial.
You mentioned the rain too. Soft turf definitely benefited Fulminio in the inaugural Boston Stakes at Colonial. This was a best bet for me, but not a great price, I would say, at all in this race. Ended up going off as the post-time favorite. There was a vulnerable morning line favorite for Mark Casse, who ended up finishing 4th in this race. And then back-to-back, Fulminio has won stakes races. His last start was at Pimlico in the James W. Murphy, also over soft turf. Had the same exacta in this race. Crystal Conquest rallied to finish 2nd in this as well. But I also wanted to mention there were a couple of maiden special weights at Colonial where there were very dominant winners in a lot of these maiden special weights, but one in particular was Florida-bred Bella Cleopatra, who won by 6.5 lengths over 7 rivals in a 5.5 furlong dirt sprint, clocked a 74 brisnet speed figure in her debut. And this is a daughter of Vekoma, who has been very good as a freshman sire and earned his 11th winner in this race, now ranked 2nd by winners and overall earnings. We're going to talk about the leader of the first crop sires, James. You, I believe, are going to mention a son of complexity, and I'll be talking about one as well a little bit later. But a very good win. You can see Bella Cleopatra just starts to pull away in this race. And we have a couple other maidens for Vekoma that are going to be making their debut this week, one at Colonial as well. Susie's Pride, and then No Evidence is a first-time starter for Christophe Clement, who will make his debut on Friday at Saratoga in a $100,000 maiden special weight. So I'm interested to see what happens there, because Vekoma and Complexity both have very high win percentages with their progeny. So I don't know who's going to come out on top at the end of the year, but they're both very exciting freshman sires.
They got like almost 25 winners combined, and it's mid-July, so it's staggering how many winners they've thrown so far. I think it's 12 and 11.
Yep, that's right. All right, well, Nick, what else caught your eye this weekend?
I'll tell you, it was the performance on Sunday in the quick call from Star of Mystery, who got the job done as a pretty heavy favorite. She had been entered in the Coronation Cup on Friday against 3-year-old fillies. Now, mind you, this is a 3-year-old filly who had run third in the Jaipur behind Cogburn on Belmont Day, really lost a photo by a narrow margin for second, and was coming back to make her second domestic start. And they ended up opting for this quick call. And I thought this was an awfully compelling performance. It tallied very large speed figures on just about any measurable number, and she looks like a really interesting prospect for some of the big money turf sprint races that we'll see in the latter half of the year. There's a newly minted Grade 1 at Kentucky Downs for 3-year-olds that she would be eligible for. There's also a turf sprint that's worth somewhere around $25 million. I think the purses tend to go through the roof at Kentucky Downs, but she could end up there as well. I think that's where Cogburn's heading. So whether they meet up again before the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint at Del Mar should be very interesting. I like that Star of Mystery seems to have no issue getting the 5 furlongs without a problem. She wants to come from a little bit off the pace, but her turn of foot was very quick in this race, and she really sprinted by her competition nicely. The second place finisher, Mansa Musa, had run very well, granted in an allowance race, but on the end of the Belmont Day card, and she blew by him like he was standing still. So I thought this was a really interesting effort, and I would imagine the connections are very much looking forward to their second crack at Cogburn.
Yeah, I hope to see Star of Mystery for years to come. I thought that was a sensational performance by her. I'm going to mention for what else some 2-year-olds at Saratoga. I'll start off. I'll start off with Tough Catch on Saturday. Dallas Stewart, he likes to win a maiden race at Saratoga. He won, I remember, on the Travers undercard, Classy John, a Louisiana bred, 12-1 debut winner back in 2018. He had Big Scully a couple years ago. This Tough Catch was the 12th winner by Complexity. Had showed up with some bullet works at Churchill Downs and showed speed right from the rail, opened up a clear lead on him. Wound up never really seriously wound up being like 3/4 of a length, but held on pretty well. Got actually earned a 90 Brisnet speed rating, which was the fastest 2-year-old speed rating for the opening week at Saratoga, faster than both stakes. So I'll mention that Tough Catch. He's definitely not. Always watch out for Dallas Stewart as well with these firsters at Saratoga. I mean, it's just another example of it. And then I'll go to on Thursday's card. There was a maiden special weight with Strong State in it. She had run second at first asking at Saratoga to Sherbini, and she came back here. She's from the first crop of Tom Satat. Alstall Jr. She's on the inside. This is Will Not Be Swayed, a firster for Brad Cox on the outside. And this was just a terrific, I thought, stretch run between these two real promising 2-year-old fillies. The gap back to fourth was 14 lengths. Strong State earned a solid 87 number. And, like I said, very promising for Alstall Jr. The Strong State was exiting a second to Sherbini. The filly that ran third in her first start that day to Dare to Breeze. She came back on Sunday, won the opener by 6 lengths at odds on. Looked good doing so. And then I'll mention even Sherbini and Thursday's Schuylerville. She completely walked out of the starting gate, was last at 10 early. I thought she offered a good run from off the pace to be a rally in second there. So just the ultimate key race at Churchill Downs back in mid-June. Also, as far as that Scholarville goes, I mean, the Queen's MG, she did look good winning it. Her number came back a little bit low, 84. So that was the only negative takeaway I had for her. And, Ashley will go more into Moplex, another winner for Complexity, who basically led all the way in the Sanford on Saturday. Obviously benefited from the defection of Mente, Fierceness's half brother. He's scratched in the morning due to a fever, so hopefully he'll be back training here soon for Pletcher. But Moplex, a New York bred, definitely going to have some options for Maya Engelhart moving forward off of this win.
I was going to say, too, the Queen's MG won at 44-1 in that state. And she also won on debut at 45-1. No one's respecting her, so I think it's time to.
Yeah, well, she got purchased off of that race, that debut performance, got bought off of that win. She was the first starter, first winner for 1,000 Words on that first Sunday at Keeneland. Gamely won a maiden race by like a head that day. Came back, was a private purchase, ran last as the favorite in the Astoria during the Belmont at Saratoga Festival. But if you can make an excuse for that effort, I didn't think it was that big a surprise. I couldn't make an excuse for it. I didn't see it coming. But in retrospect, I mean, for whatever reason, she just didn't fire on that Astoria. But she ran back to her debut in a sense, or at least, had shown promise in her debut and carried it forward.
And I'll talk a little bit more about Moplex, who won the Grade 3 Sanford. This pushed Complexity to the top of the progeny earnings rankings of first crop sires. And Moplex was a debut winner by 10 lengths against New York breds at Belmont at the Big A, and then jumped to graded stakes competition. Of course, as you mentioned, the scratch of Minty really benefited Moplex because Todd Pletcher was the winningest trainer in the Sanford, had 8 wins, and then his full brother to Fierceness scratched in this race. Also, John Velasquez would have been aboard. Minty has the record 7 wins in the Sanford, but now Irad Ortiz Jr. has 5 wins, and he's earned them all in the last decade. So he's really kind of taking over the Sanford Stakes and just becoming dominant. Probably going to end up with that record, I'd say, in a couple of years. And now Moplex is likely going to point toward the hopeful on September 2nd at Saratoga. So one to watch. He's 2 for 2 now for his career and beat a really good runner in, was it Studley Do Right, I think is the name of it, that was also unbeaten and had just won a stakes race, but not even sure where he ended up finishing. I think was the second. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we'll see what happens next with, actually, the trainer, Jeremiah Engelhart, said that he thought that Moplex seemed like he would like to run longer, but came out really fast, went gate to wire in this race. So a very good win for him in his stakes debut. And finally, we have Haskell Day at Monmouth Park and a couple of big stakes races at Saratoga. So, Nick, what are you most looking forward to this weekend?
Yeah, I think the Haskell, the matchup that's on deck between 2 Todd Pletcher trainees owned by Rapoli Stable, Mindframe, and Fierceness. I'm going to be a little surprised that both of these horses end up running in there. I have no knowledge of anything that they're going to do, but Fierceness, of course, the Kentucky Derby favorite, looking to rebound. He has not run since then. He was supposed to run in the Belmont, but the connections were not satisfied with his training prior to that, so he's been off until now. And Mindframe, who ran just a tremendous race in the Belmont, coming up just shy of Dornoch. We'll get Dornoch as well in the Haskell, but for my money, of these horses, what we've seen when he's on his game from Fierceness is just at a totally different level than anything we've seen from any of them. So fingers crossed we get the best punch from Fierceness, because we need that as a division of, I would say, of 3-year-olds that's becoming a little too scattered and a little too basic. We kind of need a strong performance to restore the confidence a little bit.
Well, the pattern is he should win this because he did not show up in the Derby, and He wins every other.
Yeah, he just can't seem to overcome any adversity, right? And I think he might read his own PPs, and maybe he knows that he doesn't run well here.
I think his Florida Derby win was suspect. I mean, it just had everything his own way. It was a published workout that day. The one thing I will say about Fierceness and Saturday's Haskell is I expect him to break running. I mean, you have a horse that at least in the Holy Bowl and the Kentucky Derby, he was taking pressure in both of those starts, unlike the Florida Derby, and he gave way both times. You have a horse who's got that, shown that tendency. The best way to alleviate that, in my mind, is
Go.
yeah, sprint clear early and lead all the way. So I expect him to show those tactics, but Dornick has some speed. I don't think he'll be far back. He'll be able to put some pressure on him at some point, and Mindframe as well. And if Mindframe does enter on Wednesday in the Haskell, that's the horse I'm looking at. I thought his maiden race at 7 furlongs and his allowance race at a mile and a 16th were both good. And I think he'll gain a ton from that top-class effort in the Belmont where he ran a half-length second to Dornick. So I think the mile and 8 distance will be perfect for him. And if he does advance off of that Belmont effort, I think he'll be tough to beat. I'll mention with Torpedo Anna, they did get 4 runners to run against her in the Coaching Club American Oaks. Barring some like big surprise to me, the real gauge for her this season has just been like how convincingly she's won. She won her first race by 4, the Fantasy. She won the Kentucky Oaks by 4 3/4. She's won the Acorn by 5.5. So if she continues to just crush them and does so in a fast time, it just looks like it's going to be all the makings for her to take on males in the Travers at the end of the month. And I'll mention the Curlin real quick on Friday. I'm looking forward to seeing Unmatched Wisdom run for Chad Brown in that spot. 2 for 2 colt by, or I think he's a gelding, might be a colt by Cairo Prince. And he's really looked terrific winning both races so far, Ashley.
Torpedo Anna is the horse I'm most looking forward to in the Coaching Club American Oaks. And among those rivals that she's facing, one of them was a horse that I was really excited about for the Kentucky Oaks, Candied, who did not make the field. But I think you're right. It's going to be hard for any of these runners to beat Torpedo Anna. Looking at her recent form, the only race that she's lost in her career was the Goldenrod. You do have Intricate, who beat her in the Goldenrod in this race, but Intricate has really kind of disappointed since that big win in the Goldenrod. And I think Torpedo Anna really should go gate to wire if you look at the pace setup of this very small field in this race. But speaking of the very wide open 3-year-old division, I do feel like Torpedo Anna would have a chance against the boys if she raced in the Travers. And the news came out this week. Kenny McPeak said that Mystic Dan is going back to Keeneland for training and probably will not appear in the Travers. So if we get a really big showing from Torpedo Anna, maybe we do see her in the Travers. And actually, in the history of that race, fillies won 3 of the first 5 Travers, but have not won since 1915. But I do think, especially looking at that 3-year-old division, I think Torpedo Anna could be the next filly to win it if we see her in that race.
Well, back when Rachel Alexandra, they ran the Coaching Club American, she ran in the Mother Goose at Belmont Park before Saratoga, and she only faced 2 in there, and she won it by 19 3/4 lengths or 20 lengths or whatever, and that was it. Her remaining races that year were against males. So Torpedo Anna has a little bit of a look as Rachel Alexandra did before. I don't know if I said that right, but Rachel Alexandra before. Torpedo Anna has a little bit of a look right now like that, and if she turns in a big effort in the CCA, then, she could be on that same path because – one thing, Nick, that I've mentioned a bunch of times is, there's just no standouts in either the 3-year-old male division or the older male division right now. And if there was ever a year for fillies, this could be the one. But she's got to keep on stepping up and running fast races to beat males this fall.
Yeah, totally agree. The way she handles Candied will be a good gauge on, whether she should even bother, with 3-year-old fillies again, because Candied's kind of the only relatively new face. Candied obviously missed the Kentucky Oaks because she didn't have enough points to get in, and then came back and ran very well, ran a compelling race in the Ladies' Secret, and Honor D Lady came right back to win the Delaware Handicap and really validated that speed figure. So I wouldn't sleep on Candied, but I do think obviously Torpedo Anna is an overwhelming favorite, and I'm generally not one to get all wrapped up in the girls versus boys thing. However, I do understand in this scenario, they're really, if she bags, this will be her 3rd Grade 1 of the year. Adding the Alabama to it, really, she's a filly, so there's not as much of a need to get another Grade 1. To do something interesting like trying to run her against boys in the Travers, I think feels like, from a sporting perspective, it would be a little bit more fun.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for the Racing Roundtable. Nick, thanks for joining us. So you're going to watch the All-Star game tonight?
Thanks so much. I'll be watching, pulling for Yordan Alvarez to hit a home run.
Hopefully we get a better national anthem tonight.
It can't be worse. I could
right.
sing it and it would be better.
All right, well, we'll be back next Tuesday. And, of course, check out our best bets and fades on the Twin Spires Jury on Thursday as well. We'll see you next time.